Ethan Cole slammed his last $20 bill on the diner counter, stared at it for 3 full seconds, and then slid it back into his pocket. His son needed dinner. The electricity bill could wait one more day. That's the kind of math no man should have to do at 34 years old. But Ethan did it every single morning before his eyes were even fully open. He had no idea that 24 hours later, one of the wealthiest women in America would press her business card into his hand and whisper something he'd never forget. And she hadn't even blushed doing it. Drop a comment with your city. Let me see how far this story travels. And if you're new here, hit subscribe. You don't want to miss what happens next. The Millbrook Diner on West 14th had been open since 1987, and it smelled exactly like it. Grease and burnt coffee, and the ghost of 1,000 breakfasts nobody could afford to enjoy slowly. Ethan Cole had been working the early shift there 3 days a week for the past 8 months, from 5:30 in the morning until 11, before racing across town to his second job at a furniture warehouse on the South End. He moved fast. He always moved fast. Fast was the only gear he had left. That Tuesday morning started the same way every Tuesday morning started. Alarm at 4:50. Liam still asleep in the only bedroom. Ethan in the kitchen standing at the counter staring at the open refrigerator like it owed him something: half a carton of orange juice, leftover rice, 1 egg, a block of cheese with the corner cut off. He closed the door, opened the cabinet above the stove. Instant oatmeal, 1 packet. He made it with hot water from the tap because the microwave had died 2 weeks ago and he hadn't replaced it yet. He put the bowl on the small table by the window and went to wake his son. "Buddy." He touched Liam's shoulder. "Time." Liam was 7 years old with his mother's dark eyes and Ethan's jaw, and he woke up the same way every morning, slowly, reluctantly, like waking up was a negotiation. He pulled the blanket tighter. 5 more minutes. "You said that yesterday." "I mean it this time." "You said that too." Ethan sat on the edge of the bed. "Oatmeal's on the table. I put the last of the brown sugar in it." That got the boy moving. Ethan watched him shuffle to the kitchen in his socks, dragging his backpack behind him, and felt the familiar tightening in his chest. Not pain exactly, more like pressure. The kind that lives right below the breastbone and never fully goes away. He tied his own shoes, standing up in the hallway, checked his phone. 2 missed calls from the warehouse supervisor about a Saturday shift. He'd call back on his break. He dropped Liam at school by 7:15, kissed the top of his head at the curb, and watched him disappear through the double doors without looking back. Ethan stood there an extra second, just 1 second. Then he turned and walked to the subway. The Millbrook was packed by 8. Regulars at the counter, a handful of suits grabbing coffee on their way to Midtown, a table of women who came in every Tuesday and always ordered the same thing and always tipped exactly 12%. Ethan moved between them without thinking, refilling cups, dropping plates, calling orders back to the kitchen in the shorthand he'd picked up in his first week. He was good at this. He was good at most things that required keeping multiple problems alive in his head at the same time. "Cole?" His manager, Dennis, leaned out from behind the pass-through window. Dennis was 60, heavy-set, perpetually suspicious of everyone under 40. "You gotta walk in. Table 6. Ethan glanced over. Table 6 was the corner booth, the one by the window that looked out onto the sidewalk. A woman had just sat down. She was alone, which was unusual for that booth. It seated 4. She was wearing a dark coat, no jewelry that he could see, and she was looking out the window, like she was thinking about something that had nothing to do with breakfast. He grabbed a menu and walked over. "Morning," he said. "Can I start you off with some coffee?" She turned from the window and looked at him. She had sharp eyes, not unkind, but direct. The kind of eyes that were used to reading rooms and making quick assessments, and usually being right. "Just water, please," she said. "And a few minutes." "Take your time." He brought the water and moved on. 2 more tables needed attention. He forgot about her for a while, the way you forget about anything that isn't actively demanding something from you. 20 minutes later, when he came back, she still hadn't ordered. "I'm sorry," she said before he could speak. "I've been sitting here deciding between eggs and a protein bar I have in my bag, which is a genuinely embarrassing problem to have." He almost smiled. "The eggs are better." "Are they? The protein bar is definitely better for you, but you didn't come in here because you wanted something good for you." She looked at him for a moment. Something shifted behind her eyes, small, like a door opening just a crack. "Scrambled?" she said. "Wheat toast. Thank you." He wrote it down and walked back to the window. He didn't think about her again until she was leaving. He was clearing a table near the door when she passed him coat-buttoned bag over her shoulder, and she paused. Just for a second, like she'd forgotten something or decided something or both. "The eggs were good," she said. "Told you." She looked at him a beat longer than the moment required. Then she walked out. He watched the door close behind her. One of the regulars at the counter, a retired transit worker named Al, who had opinions about everything, leaned over and said, "That was Maya Klein." Ethan looked at him. The name didn't register immediately. Al raised his eyebrows. "Klein Industries. She's on the news twice a week, son. Worth about $4 billion last I heard." Ethan looked back at the door. "She left a $30 tip on a $7 breakfast," he said, because that was the thing he'd actually noticed. He didn't see her again for 6 days. In those 6 days, he picked up the Saturday shift at the warehouse, helped Liam with a science project about the water cycle, argued on the phone for 40 minutes with the insurance company about a claim from 8 months ago that was still somehow unresolved, ate peanut butter sandwiches for dinner 3 nights in a row, and slept an average of 5 hours per night. Standard week. The second time she came in, she sat at the counter. That was different. The counter was for people who were alone and didn't mind being around other people who were alone. It was an honest kind of seating choice. He noticed it. "Eggs again?" he asked. "You remembered." "It's a small menu." Still. She settled onto the stool, set her bag down. She was dressed differently this time, more casual, like she'd made a deliberate choice to look less like herself, or less like whoever she was when she wasn't here. "Yes, eggs, and coffee this time." He poured it before she finished the sentence. "You work doubles here?" she asked. He glanced at her. "I work early shift. Got another job in the afternoon." "2 jobs. Sometimes 3. He said it the way he said everything straight. No drama, no invitation for pity. It was just information. She wrapped both hands around the mug and looked down at the coffee. "How old's your son?" He stopped moving. Not visibly, his hands kept doing what they were doing, wiping down the counter, stacking a creamer. But something went still inside him. "How do you know I have a son?" "You have a drawing on your order pad," she said. "Crayon, a rocket ship. The handwriting looks like a kid who's around 7 or 8. He looked down at the pad in his apron pocket. The corner of Liam's drawing was sticking out. He'd forgotten it was there. 7, he said. "What's his name?" He looked at her directly now. "Why?" She didn't flinch. "I'm asking because I'm curious, not because I need the information." The distinction mattered to him. He didn't know why. He thought about it for a second longer than he needed to. "Liam." She nodded like she was filing it somewhere. "He draws good rockets. He wants to be an astronaut." "Smart kid." "Yeah." The pressure behind his breastbone again, but softer this time. A different quality. "He is." The third time she came in, she brought a problem with her. He could see it before she sat down. The set of her jaw, the way she dropped her bag instead of placing it. The fact that she looked at her phone twice in the first 30 seconds and then turned it face down on the counter like she was punishing it. He poured the coffee without being asked. "Thank you," she said. Rough morning. Board meeting. She picked up the mug. 12 people in a room, all of them technically working for me, none of them actually listening to me. What were they not listening about? She looked at him sideways, like she hadn't expected the follow-up question. A new acquisition. I want to move on it. They want 6 more months of analysis. Is 6 months too long? The window closes in 45 days. Then yeah, he said. 6 months is too long. Something in her expression loosened. You didn't ask me what the acquisition was. Doesn't matter what it is. If the window's 45 days and your instinct says move, then move. The analysis is just a way for scared people to feel like they're doing something. She was quiet for a moment. The counter around her was busy. Al 2 stools down, talking to the couple beside him, the kitchen clanging, someone's kid crying 2 tables back. But she was looking at Ethan like he was the only sound in the room. You have strong opinions for a man who just poured my coffee, she said. You have strong opinions for someone who asked me about them. She laughed. Actually laughed, not polished or performative, a real sound, fast and surprised, like it got out before she could decide whether to let it. She covered it with her hand and looked away. He kept working. He told himself it wasn't anything. On the subway home, watching the tunnel walls blur past, he replayed the conversation the way you replay something you're trying to convince yourself isn't significant. She was a regular. Regulars talked to waitstaff. That was the whole ecosystem of a diner counter. It didn't mean anything. He thought about her laugh. He thought about the way she'd said Liam not out loud, but she'd nodded like the name landed somewhere real. He thought about $4 billion and the distance that represented. And then he thought about his refrigerator and the distance that represented, and he let those 2 things sit next to each other until the feeling sorted itself out. It sorted itself out into nothing. That was the right answer. That was the only answer that made sense. He got off at his stop, picked up Liam from the after-school program, stopped at the bodega for milk and bread, went home, made dinner, helped with homework, read 2 chapters of a book about space. Liam's current obsession until the boy fell asleep mid-sentence. He sat at the kitchen table after in the quiet and paid 2 bills online and deferred 1. He didn't think about Maya Klein again that night, or at least he tried not to. The 4th time she came in, she was on the phone. She walked to the counter and sat down without looking up. The phone pressed to her ear, her voice low and controlled. Tell him the number is final. If he wants to negotiate, he had 2 weeks to do that. The window is closed on this end. A pause. I understand he's unhappy. He can be unhappy somewhere else. She hung up, set the phone down face up this time, and looked at Ethan. Coffee, she said. Already moving. She watched him pour it. I took the deal. The 45-day one. Signed yesterday. He set the mug in front of her. How do you feel? Terrified, she said immediately, like she'd been waiting for someone to ask. Which is how I know it's right. He nodded slowly. Fear and instinct feel the same when the stakes are real. She tilted her head. Where did you get that? My father said it. He was talking about something else, but it stayed. She looked at him for a long moment. The morning rush moved around them. Orders called, plates clanging, the bell above the door, ringing as people came and went. But she was still, both hands around the mug, looking at him like she was trying to figure out a problem she hadn't named yet. Can I ask you something? She said. You're going to whether I say yes or not. True. A small smile. What are you doing here? He frowned. I work here. I know, but... She paused. Chose her words carefully, which he noticed because she didn't seem like someone who usually needed to be careful with words. You're clearly, you think fast. You listen well. You don't fill silence with noise. That's rarer than people think. Why are you... She stopped again. I'm not saying this right. You're asking why I'm waiting tables instead of something else. I'm asking what happened. The question landed differently than he expected. Not like an accusation, more like something she genuinely wanted to understand, the same directness she'd used from the beginning, but pointed somewhere more personal now. He was quiet for a moment. My wife left when Liam was 2, he said. I had a management job at a logistics company. Good salary, benefits, the whole thing. But the hours weren't compatible with being a single father to a toddler, so I stepped back. Took the diner job because it's early hours and I'm done by 11 and I can be present for him the rest of the day. He picked up a rag, wiped down a section of counter that didn't need wiping. Old habit, something to do with his hands. The warehouse is afternoon Tuesdays and Thursdays and Saturdays. Fits around school pickup. She was listening like each word cost something, and she was paying attention to all of it. And the third job, she said. Delivery driving. Evenings sometimes. When I need the extra. How much sleep are you getting? He almost laughed. Enough. That wasn't convincing. It doesn't have to be. I'm fine. I didn't ask if you were fine. Her voice was quiet, but there was something underneath it, an edge not hostile, but firm. Like she was pushing on something, and she knew it. I asked how much sleep. He looked at her. Why does it matter to you? She held his gaze. A second passed. 2. I don't entirely know yet, she said. He thought about that sentence for the rest of the shift. I don't entirely know yet. It was the most honest thing anyone had said to him in longer than he could remember. Not the content of it, the form. The fact that she'd said yet like the knowing was coming and she was willing to wait for it. Most people in his experience pretended to know things they didn't. It was how people protected themselves. You acted certain, and the uncertainty stayed behind a door where nobody could use it against you. She'd left the door open, right in front of him, without seeming worried about it. He didn't know what to do with that. So he kept moving the way he always kept moving through the rest of the shift, and the subway ride, and the warehouse, and the school pickup, and dinner, and bedtime. But that night, sitting at the kitchen table in the quiet, he didn't pay bills. He just sat there. He thought about a woman with $4 billion who had said, I don't entirely know yet, like it was the easiest thing in the world. And for the first time in a long time, the pressure behind his breastbone felt less like weight. It felt like something shifting. He didn't trust it, not even a little. But he felt it. And that for Ethan Cole, a man who had trained himself out of feeling things that cost too much, was the most dangerous thing that had happened to him in years. She didn't come in on Wednesday. Ethan noticed. He didn't want to notice, but he did the way you notice a sound that's been playing in the background and then suddenly stops. The counter felt different without her there. Wider somehow. More ordinary. He told himself that was ridiculous. He poured coffee for Al, who was deep in a monologue about the city's parking situation, and he nodded in the right places, and refilled without being asked, and moved through his shift the same way he always moved through it, efficiently, without waste. But some part of his attention kept going back to the corner of the counter where she sat, the way you keep touching a bruise to check if it still hurts. It still hurt, or whatever the equivalent of hurt was when the thing wasn't pain. Thursday was the same. He got through it. Friday morning she walked in at 8:40, 20 minutes later than usual, and she looked like she hadn't slept. Not badly, not obviously. She was still put together, still moved like someone who owned the room she walked into. But her eyes had that specific flatness that comes from running on fumes and caffeine and sheer willpower, and Ethan recognized it immediately because he'd seen it in his own mirror for the past 3 years. He had the coffee poured before she reached the counter. She sat down, wrapped her hands around the mug, and said nothing for almost a full minute. He let her have it. He was good at that, letting silence be silence, not rushing to fill it up. 2 days, she finally said. Yeah. I had a thing. She didn't explain what the thing was, and he didn't ask. How was your week? The question caught him off guard, not because it was complicated, but because of the way she asked it, like she actually wanted to know, like she'd been thinking about asking it for 2 days, and was only now getting the chance. Liam had a cold, he said. Missed 2 days of school. I worked the warehouse from home, which is not a thing. The warehouse technically allows, but my supervisor owes me about 11 favors, so we made it work. Is he okay now? Kids bounce back fast. He was fine by Wednesday. He paused. He asked me if I knew anyone famous. She looked up. Why? I mentioned a regular had come in and left a big tip. He wanted to know if it was a baseball player. She laughed, that same fast, unguarded sound from before gone as quickly as it came. What did you tell him? I said no, which is true. I'm not famous, she said. Al at the end of the counter thinks you are. She glanced down toward Al, who was at that moment reading a newspaper and apparently ignoring the entire world. Al needs a more exciting life. Don't tell him that. He'll talk to you for 45 minutes about parking. She smiled into her mug. It was a real smile, small, not performed, the kind that lives in the eyes more than the mouth. He caught it and looked away before she could catch him catching it. Scrambled, he said. Please. He called it back to the kitchen and kept moving. She stayed longer than usual that morning, long enough that the breakfast rush thinned out and the counter got quiet, and there was no real reason to keep moving fast. He topped off her coffee twice. She didn't seem to be in a hurry to be anywhere, which felt like the opposite of everything he'd understood about her. Can I ask you something? He said during a lull. She looked up. You're going to, whether I say yes or not, she said, which was exactly what he'd said to her a week ago, and he felt something spark in his chest, small but warm like a match struck in a cold room. Fair enough. He leaned against the counter, not close, just present. You come in here almost every morning. You could have breakfast anywhere in this city. Places where the eggs are actually better. Why here? She thought about it. He could see her thinking, really thinking, not reaching for the fast answer. First time I came in, I was on my way somewhere I didn't want to go. A meeting that was going to be ugly, and I walked past the window and it just looked real. You know, like the inside of a place that didn't care what you were worth. She turned the mug slowly in her hands. I guess I keep coming back for the same reason. Because we don't know who you are. Because you don't care who I am. She looked at him. There's a difference. He thought about that. Most people would rather have the first one. Most people haven't spent 15 years having everyone around them care very deeply about exactly who they are and what they can do for them. Her voice didn't have bitterness in it, just fact. The flat, clean kind of fact that comes from a long time of seeing something clearly. It gets exhausting. I can imagine. No, she said, not unkindly. You really can't. He accepted that. She was right. He couldn't. They were quiet for a moment. Outside, a bus rolled past. The kitchen radio was playing something low. What about you? She said. You ever want to talk to someone who doesn't know who you are? I'm a server in a diner, he said. Nobody knows who I am. That's not an answer. He looked at her. She was watching him with that direct steadiness, the kind that made it hard to deflect, without it feeling like a choice you were making in front of her. He didn't like being seen making choices. He preferred to make them in private, where nobody could read the hesitation. Sometimes, he said finally. But it gets quieter the longer you're alone. You stop wanting things that cost too much to want. Is that healthy? It's functional. She tilted her head. You know those aren't the same thing. Yeah, he said. I know. She left him her number that morning. Not dramatically, she didn't make it a moment. She just wrote it on a napkin while he was turned away, and left it under the edge of her mug, with a note that said, In case Liam needs anything, and you're in a bind. M. He found it when he was clearing the counter. He stood there for a second holding the napkin, reading it twice. Then he folded it and put it in his apron pocket next to Liam's rocket drawing and went back to work. Al looked at him from 2 stools down. She leave you her number? She left a note. Same thing. It's not the same thing, Al. Son? Al said, folding his newspaper. I have been sitting at this counter for 9 years. That woman has never left anyone a note. He picked up his coffee. I'm just saying. Ethan said nothing. He kept wiping the counter. He didn't use the number for 3 days. On the 3rd day, Liam's school called at 2:15 in the afternoon, when Ethan was in the middle of a warehouse floor, moving inventory, with his phone on the forklift, and exactly zero ability to leave. The after-school coordinator had called twice before he saw the missed calls at 3:30, and by then the school was closing and nobody was picking up, and there were 2 messages on his voicemail from increasingly anxious staff about a boy sitting in the main office waiting for his dad. He ran 3 blocks to the subway. The whole way he was doing the math on how long the ride was, and what time they closed the office and who else he could call, and there was nobody. That was the thing about being genuinely alone. There was never anyone else to call. He was on the platform waiting for the train when he remembered the napkin. He stared at his phone for a full 10 seconds, feeling the weight of it. The thing it meant to use the number, the admission of need, the crossing of a line he'd been very deliberately not crossing. He pressed call. She picked up on the second ring. "Ethan? I need a favor," he said, "and I need you to tell me right now if this is a bad time because I don't do this. I don't ask for help. But my kid is sitting in the school office, and I'm 20 minutes away on a good day, and I don't know if—" "What school?" she said. Her voice was calm. Not the kind of calm that's performing calm, but the kind that's actually calm because it's already moved past the question into solving the problem. He told her. "I know it," she said. "I'm 7 blocks away. What's his teacher's name? What does he look like? And what's your middle name?" "My middle name. So he knows I'm not a stranger." He exhaled. Something in him released just a little, the way a fist opens slowly. "James. His teacher is Mrs. Park. He's 7, dark hair, blue jacket, has a backpack with a rocket on it." "Ethan James." He could hear her moving, the sound of heels on pavement, a door. "I'll be there in 10 minutes. I'll call you when I have him." She hung up. He stood on the platform and stared at the phone and felt something he hadn't felt in a very long time. Not gratitude exactly, though it was that too. Something underneath the gratitude. Something that scared him more. He felt less alone. Just for a moment. Just a crack of it. But it was there. The train was delayed 12 minutes. He spent every one of them standing, not sitting like sitting would slow him down. When his phone buzzed, he grabbed it before the second vibration. "He's with me. We're outside the school. He wants to know if the lady who picked him up is a princess. I told him I'm currently undecided. Come find us." He read it twice. Laughed once, short and sharp, startling the woman next to him. He texted back, 10 minutes. She sent back, "We'll be here. He's telling me about rockets." He put the phone in his pocket, and for the next 10 minutes, he stood on that train and stared at nothing, and felt the tightening in his chest do something it almost never did. It loosened. He found them on the steps outside the school's main entrance. Liam was sitting on the 3rd step with his backpack in his lap, talking with the focused intensity of a child who has found an adult willing to take his subject seriously, which was his favorite kind of adult. Maya was sitting beside him, actually sitting on the concrete steps, coat and everything, and she was listening with her full attention, the way Ethan had noticed she always listened to things that interested her. "Dad!" Liam stood up so fast he nearly dropped his backpack. He launched off the step, and Ethan caught him, lifted him, held him for a second longer than usual. "Hey, buddy!" He put him down, checked him over, out of pure parental instinct. Nothing wrong, of course, just a kid who'd waited too long and gotten anxious. "Sorry I'm late. Phone was on the forklift." Maya knew where Mars was, Liam said immediately, like this was the most important information of the day. Ethan looked up. Maya had stood, was brushing off her coat, without any apparent irritation about the concrete dust. "Basic astronomy," she said. "He's testing me on the moons of Jupiter next." "Ganymede," Liam said with great seriousness. "Biggest moon in the solar system," Maya said. Liam pointed at her like she'd just won a prize. Ethan looked between them and felt the loosening again, wider this time in his chest and his throat. "Thank you," he said to her. She waved it off. He was fine. Good company. She looked at Liam. "Better than my board meetings, honestly." "I would be," Liam agreed. Ethan almost smiled. "We should let you get back to your day." "I'm done for the day," she said, and then carefully, like she was aware of what she was doing. "There's a soup place around the corner. Good broth, nothing fancy. I owe Liam a proper thank you for the Jupiter tutorial." Ethan went still. "You don't have to do that," he said. "I know I don't have to." She looked at him steadily. "I want to. There's a difference." He heard the echo of his own words from earlier in the week, the things she'd said about knowing and caring. He recognized what she was doing, not manipulating, not pressuring, just being direct. The way she was always direct. He looked at Liam, who was looking at both of them with 7-year-old shamelessness. "Can we?" Liam said. Ethan looked at Maya. She was waiting. Not pushing, just waiting. "Yeah," he said. "Okay." The soup place was small, 4 tables, the kind of restaurant that had been there 20 years and would probably be there 20 more, because it didn't need to be anything other than what it was. They sat in the back corner. Liam ordered chicken broth and a grilled cheese, which was not on the menu, but the woman who ran the place came out herself when she recognized Maya and said she'd make it. "Does that happen a lot?" Ethan asked when the woman went back. "Sometimes." Maya wrapped her hands around her bowl, which she'd gotten already. "I grew up 6 blocks from here. She knew my mother." He looked at her. "You grew up here in this neighborhood?" Surprised. "Honestly, yes." She looked at her soup. "I don't talk about it much, but yeah, 3 of us in a 2-bedroom apartment on Decker Street. My mother worked nights. My brother and I made a lot of soup." A pause. "Not good soup, but soup." Liam looked up from his grilled cheese, which had arrived. "What kind?" "Mostly the kind that comes in a packet," she said. "You ever have that kind?" "The red one?" Liam said, nodding. "We have that when Dad's tired." Ethan looked at his son and felt the complicated tenderness that came from being known by someone too young to understand what they were knowing. "Yeah," Maya said, looking at Ethan over Liam's head. Her expression was unguarded for just a second, something real and unpolished and unexpectedly soft. "The red one." They ate in quiet for a while. Not the uncomfortable kind. The kind that happens between people when the conversation has gone somewhere real and needs a moment to breathe. "How did you get from packet soup to $4 billion? Ethan said. She looked at him. He thought she might deflect. He'd half expected it. Instead, she said, "I got a scholarship to state school, studied finance, worked for a consulting firm for 6 years, saved everything, and made one bet at exactly the right moment on a commercial real estate deal that everyone told me was a mistake." She picked up her spoon. "Then I made another one, and another." She paused. "Also, I didn't sleep for about 8 years." "Functional," he said. The corner of her mouth moved. "Exactly." "Not healthy." "Not even a little." He watched her. She was looking at her bowl, turning the spoon slowly. Something in her posture had changed, less the CEO, less the woman who walked into rooms and owned them. She was sitting like someone who had carried something for a long time and was, maybe for the first time in a while, not thinking about the weight of it. "Can I tell you something?" she said. "You're going to whether you say yes or not." She looked at him. "I know. I stole your line." A breath. "The deal I signed last week. The 45-day one." She set down the spoon. "It's the biggest thing I've ever done. Bigger than the first one. And I signed it, and I sat in the car afterward, and I had nobody to call." Ethan said nothing. He listened. "I have a team. I have an assistant who is genuinely excellent. I have a lawyer who has my back on everything, and a CFO who hasn't slept since 2019. She was looking at the table now. "And I sat in the back of that car, and I thought, there is not one person I can call right now and just say I'm scared. Not one." The restaurant was quiet around them. Liam had moved on to tracing the wood grain of the table, with his finger drifting into the private world of a child whose appetite has been satisfied. "So, you called me," Ethan said. She looked up. "You hadn't called me." "That's not what I mean." He kept his voice level, not accusing, genuinely trying to understand. "You knew I'd been thinking about calling, about asking for something, and you waited to see if I would." She was quiet for a moment. Then, maybe. "Why?" She looked at him for a long time, like she was deciding something, like she was weighing something she didn't usually put on the scale. "Because most people who call me want something I have," she said, "and I wanted to know if you were different." A beat. "Not because I was testing you, because I needed to know. For my own—" She stopped, searched for the word. "Sanity." He held her gaze. "And—" She looked at Liam for a second, who had now apparently decided to explain the table's wood grain to his soup bowl. She looked back at Ethan. "You waited 3 days to use a number I gave you for an emergency," she said. "And when you used it, the first thing you did was ask if it was a bad time." He said nothing. "You're different," she said. "I don't know what to do with that yet." There it was again. Yet. That word. That door left open. He looked at his coffee. He thought about what it would cost to walk through a door like that. The life he'd built efficient, managed, survivable, and what it would cost to introduce something into it that he couldn't manage. Something that didn't fit the math. He thought about sitting at his kitchen table in the quiet the night she'd said, "I don't entirely know yet," and the way the pressure in his chest had felt different. He thought about the fact that she was sitting in a soup restaurant on Decker Street because she'd grown up 6 blocks away, and the woman who ran it had known her mother, and she'd gone from packet soup to $4 billion, and she'd sat in the back of a car after the biggest deal of her life, and there was nobody to call. "You could have called me," he said quietly. She looked at him. Something moved in her eyes. Not surprise exactly. More like recognition. Like hearing a word in a language she'd almost forgotten. "I know," she said. Liam looked up from his soup bowl. "Are you guys done talking about adult stuff?" he asked with great patience. Maya let out a short, startled laugh. Ethan pressed his hand over his mouth. "Almost," Ethan told his son. "Okay." Liam put his chin back on his hand. "I'm going to think about Ganymede." "Good plan," Maya said, and she was still smiling when she looked back at Ethan, and it was the most real thing he'd seen on her face since the morning she'd first said, "I don't entirely know yet," and something shifted in him. Not a loosening this time, not just pressure releasing, something turning, slowly. Like a lock that hadn't been touched in a long time, responding to a key it recognized from a very long time ago. He didn't say anything about it. He never said anything about the things that scared him the most. But it happened. Right there at a back table in a soup place on Decker Street, with his son thinking about the moons of Jupiter, and a woman with $4 billion smiling at him like none of the $4 billion mattered at all. It happened. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday, which was the day Ethan worked the warehouse, so he didn't see it until that evening when he got home, found it tucked under his apartment door in a cream-colored envelope with no return address. Just his name on the front written in ink that looked like it had been chosen deliberately. He stood in the hallway and opened it. It was printed on heavy cardstock, the kind of paper that exists to remind you of the distance between itself and regular paper. Private dinner. Friday, 8 p.m. The Klein Residence, 40th floor. 1 Beacon Tower. Business casual. M. Below that, in the same handwriting as the envelope. The catering team is short a server. I thought of you. It pays $300 for the evening. Say yes. He read it twice. Then he looked up at his ceiling the way a man looks at a ceiling when he's deciding something he already knows the answer to. He texted her. "That's not why you thought of me." She texted back 4 minutes later. "No, but it's a real job and real money, and you don't have to make it anything else. Say yes, Ethan." He put the phone face down on the counter. Liam looked up from the kitchen table where he was doing homework. Who texted back? Nobody. Ethan picked up the phone. Typed yes. Sent it. Put the phone away. Finish your math. He told himself for the next 3 days that it was just a job. He was good at telling himself things. He'd built an entire life out of the discipline of not letting things be more than what they needed to be, not because he didn't feel them, but because feeling them too much was a luxury he had never been able to afford. He had a son to feed. The feeling could wait. Friday he dropped Liam at his neighbor Mrs. Carver's apartment. She was 71 and considered Liam a personal project, and the arrangement suited everyone, and took the subway uptown in his best dark pants and the white button-down he'd bought 2 years ago for a job interview and never worn since. He looked at himself in the dark window of the subway car as it moved through the tunnel. He looked like himself. That was either good or bad, depending on what the night turned out to require. The lobby of One Beacon Tower was the kind of lobby that made you aware of your shoes. He checked in at the desk, got a lanyard with a service credential, and was directed to a service elevator by a man in a suit, who looked at him in the specific way people in lobbies like that look at people with service credentials. Ethan looked back at him, just long enough to let the look sit. Then he got in the elevator. The 40th floor was already moving when he arrived. The catering crew. 5 other people, all of them faster and more at ease in the space than he was, were setting up in the kitchen, and a woman named Dana, who seemed to be running things, handed him a tray, told him his section, and moved on without stopping for pleasantries. He was fine with that. The apartment was large, in the way that stopped meaning anything past a certain point. Just space and light, and the kind of furniture that had been chosen by someone who knew what they were doing. He moved through it, setting up stations, learning the layout the way he learned any workspace methodically without sentiment. He was arranging glasses on a sideboard when he heard her voice. Moved the Caldwell meeting to Monday, which gives us the weekend, if anything needs revision before. She came through the hallway with her phone pressed to her shoulder, already dressed for the evening, saying something rapid to someone on the other end. She saw him. She stopped, just for a second. Something passed across her face, a kind of relief, almost quick and unguarded, before the professional surface closed back over it. She held up a finger to him and kept talking. He kept arranging glasses. She finished the call and came over. "You're here? You hired me. I wasn't sure you'd come." I said yes. He aligned the last glass. "I keep my word." She looked at him for a moment. She was dressed simply, dark blue, no excess. The kind of outfit that cost a lot of money specifically, so it wouldn't look like it cost a lot of money. She looked exactly like herself, which he'd noticed was the consistent thing about her. She looked the same in a diner at 8 in the morning, as she looked now 40 floors above the city. Most people didn't pull that off. "The guests start arriving at 8, she said. "About 20 people, mostly business, a few personal." She paused. "My ex-husband will be there." He looked at her. "You're telling me that specifically." "I'm telling you because his name is Marcus Webb, and he behaves differently around people he thinks are beneath him. And I want you to know in advance that anything he says to you is about him, not about you, and that I—" She stopped. Reset. "I just want you to know." He held her gaze. "I've handled difficult customers before." "He's not a customer." "I know." He picked up his tray. "But the job's the same." She nodded slow. Something in her expression that might have been gratitude and might have been something harder to name. She turned to go, then turned back. "For what it's worth, I'm glad you're here. Not just for the catering." "I know," he said. She walked back down the hallway. He stood there for a second, tray in hand, and then he went to work. The guests arrived in waves. The kind of people who arrived to these things arrived late deliberately, because being on time meant you cared about being on time, and caring was not the impression they were managing. Ethan moved through them like he was invisible, which was he'd learned over the years, both the point and the indignity of the job done well. He offered, he poured, he cleared, he answered questions about the appetizers with accurate brevity. He listened without appearing to listen, which meant he heard a great deal. He heard two men near the windows talking about a regulatory change they expected to profit from. He heard a woman in a red dress describe someone who wasn't in the room in terms that would have ended a friendship. He heard laughter that was a transaction, and laughter that was a performance. And once near the hallway, the quiet laughter of two people who actually found each other funny and weren't thinking about who was watching. He moved through all of it. He saw Maya across the room, always in motion, always in conversation, the kind of host who made each person feel like they were the only person in the room she'd wanted to talk to. She was good at it. He watched her work the way you watch someone do something they've mastered, and felt the same complicated pull he'd been feeling for 3 weeks now. Admiration and distance, and the awareness of both at the same time. Then Marcus Webb arrived. He came in 40 minutes late, which told Ethan everything before the man opened his mouth. He was tall, broad-shouldered, the kind of handsome that had been maintained with money and effort into his mid-40s. He worked the room with the ease of someone who had never once questioned whether he belonged in it. He shook hands, he laughed at his own observations. He put his hand on people's arms when he talked to them. The specific touch of a man who had learned that physical contact communicated ownership. Ethan watched him find Maya across the room. Something in her posture changed. It wasn't obvious, nobody else would have caught it. But Ethan had spent weeks watching her in the low-stakes honesty of a diner counter, and he knew what she looked like when she was fully at ease, and she was not that now. She was performing ease. There was a difference. Marcus kissed her on the cheek. She accepted it without moving toward it. Ethan picked up his tray and moved to the other end of the room. The first time Marcus addressed him was about an hour in. Ethan was offering a second pass of the smoked salmon appetizer near a cluster of guests when Marcus stepped into his path, not quite blocking him, but close enough that stopping was the only option. "What's this one?" Marcus asked, looking at the tray rather than at Ethan, the way some people look at a menu when they know the waiter is waiting. "Smoked salmon on cucumber with a dill cream," Ethan said, "and a fig and goat cheese crostini." Marcus picked up the crostini, examined it, put it back. "These are smaller than last year's." "I wouldn't know. I wasn't here last year." Marcus looked at him then. The first real look, the assessing kind, the kind that went up and down and landed on a conclusion before you'd said anything worth concluding from. "New?" "Yes." "Where'd Maya find you?" "A diner on West 14th. Marcus smiled. It was the specific smile of someone who has just been given information they find amusing for reasons they intend to keep to themselves. A diner. He picked up a glass of wine from a passing tray, not Ethan's and other servers, and looked at Ethan over the rim. "She's always had interesting taste in projects." Ethan didn't say anything. He offered the tray to the nearest guest, who took an appetizer and started a conversation with the person beside her, and Ethan moved away. He heard Marcus behind him say something to the man next to him low and followed by a short laugh. He didn't catch the words. He didn't need to. He kept moving. The second time was worse. He was in the kitchen running a refill when Dana handed him a bottle and said, "Table 3 needed it opened." He went out, found the table 4 guests mid-conversation, and was working the corkscrew when Marcus appeared at his elbow. "You need to be faster on the refills," Marcus said. Not to anyone in particular, in the specific tone of a man who is addressing a service person in front of an audience, because the audience is the point. "People have been waiting." Ethan glanced at the table. None of the 4 guests looked like they'd been waiting. 2 of them looked actively uncomfortable. He kept his face neutral and focused on the bottle. "My apologies," he said, "which was what you said. It wasn't capitulation. It was just the word." "Maya pays for quality," Marcus continued. "The whole point of hiring out, rather than using a full catering company, is the personal." He gestured vaguely. "Attention." The cork came free. Ethan poured evenly around the table, unhurried, not spilling a drop. He straightened, bottle in hand. "Enjoy the evening," he said to the table and turned. Marcus stepped into his path again. Just slightly. Just enough. "She'd tell you much about me?" Marcus asked. His voice was lower now, out of range of the table. A private cruelty, the kind that left no fingerprints. Ethan looked at him. He kept his voice level. "No." "That's interesting." Marcus tilted his head. "Because she told me about you." Another smile. The diner, the 2 jobs, the situation. He let the word do its work. "I told her it was generous. Maya's always been generous with people who need things from her. It's one of her more endearing qualities." Ethan felt the tightening in his chest, but it was different now. Not the exhausted pressure of survival. Something hotter and more controlled. The kind of feeling that comes from being very close to saying something true and deciding not to. "Will there be anything else?" he said. Marcus looked at him for one more second, the way a man looks at something he's decided isn't worth more of his time. "No." He turned back toward the party. Ethan stood there. He breathed once. Then he went back to the kitchen. Dana looked at him when he came in. "You okay?" "Fine." "He's a piece of work." "He's the ex-husband." "I know what he is." She handed him a fresh tray. "2 more passes and we're at dinner service. You're doing good." He picked up the tray. He went back out. He didn't see Maya until the sit-down dinner was halfway done. He was on the far side of the room near the serving station when he noticed her looking at him. Not across a crowded room, in a movie sense practically directly from her seat at the head of the table. She'd turned slightly in her chair, and she was looking at him with an expression he couldn't immediately read. Not distress, not performance. Something between careful and intent. He looked back. He didn't look away first. Neither did she. Then Marcus said something to her from 2 seats down, and she turned back to the table. Ethan went to the kitchen. It happened after dinner, when the guests had split into smaller groups, and the catering crew was beginning the quiet process of clearing and consolidating the invisible machinery of the end of the evening. Ethan was stacking plates near the sideboard when he heard Marcus's voice behind him, and then Maya's, and the specific quality of a conversation that was trying to be private in a room that wasn't. "I'm just saying it looks..." Marcus's voice. "Maya, come on. The optics." "I don't need you to manage my optics," Maya said, low and controlled. "He's your server, Maya. People notice." "People notice what they're looking for, and what you're looking for. I'm looking out for you." "No." Her voice dropped even lower, and Ethan kept his back to them and his hands on the plates. "You're uncomfortable. That's different. And how you handle your discomfort is not my responsibility anymore, Marcus." A pause. Then Marcus quieter. "Where'd you find him really?" "I told you. A diner." "And you what just decided he was a project?" "He's not a project." "Then what is he?" Ethan put the last plate on the stack. He picked it up. He turned. Marcus and Maya were standing near the hallway entrance, close enough to the serving area that Ethan had to pass within a few feet of them to get to the kitchen. He did not slow down. He did not speed up. He walked the same way he always walked forward without apology. Marcus looked at him as he passed. "Must be something working a party for a woman who..." "Marcus." Maya's voice was sharp and clean, the way a door shuts when someone means it. "Stop." Ethan kept walking. But 3 steps past them, he heard her say quietly to Marcus, in a voice that was done managing itself. "He has more dignity than anyone in this room, including you, especially you." He didn't stop. He went through the kitchen door and set the plates down and stood at the counter for a moment with both hands flat on the surface. Dana looked at him, said nothing. He breathed. Guests started leaving at 11. By 11:30, the apartment was half empty. By midnight, the catering crew was in final cleanup and Marcus Webb was gone, He'd left without a formal goodbye, which Ethan noted with the satisfaction of a man who had correctly predicted something. Dana paid him in cash in an envelope at the door. $300 and a 20, she added herself. For the Marcus tax, she said. We all charge it. He almost smiled. He was putting on his coat in the service hallway when he heard footsteps and then Maya's voice. Ethan? He turned. She was in the doorway, still dressed for the evening, but something about her was different from the woman who had worked the room for 4 hours. The composure was still there, but softer, like she'd let something down. I wanted to say... She stopped, looked at him with the same directness she always had, but underneath it, something raw. I should have warned you more about Marcus. You warned me enough. He said something to you. I saw it. Not a question. Ethan looked at her. People have said worse. That's not the point. She stepped into the hallway fully, and the door swung closed behind her. Just the two of them now in the narrow space. The point is, he said it in my home, at something I asked you to be part of, and I... She pressed her lips together for a second. I'm sorry, Ethan. I'm genuinely sorry. He was quiet. She was watching him with something he recognized, now the same look she'd had in the soup restaurant when she'd talked about sitting in the back of the car with nobody to call. Unguarded. Real. I heard what you said to him, Ethan said. Her jaw tightened slightly. How much? Enough. She held his gaze. I meant it. I know you did. He kept his voice even, but something was different in his chest now, not the hot, controlled feeling from earlier, and not the loosening from before. Something else, something that didn't have a name he was ready to use. That's the part that's difficult. She frowned just slightly. What do you mean? You defended me. He kept his eyes on her. And I'm standing here trying to figure out if that makes my situation better or worse. Why would it make it worse? Because... He stopped, thought about how to say it. The true version, not the managed version. Because I came here tonight and told myself it was just a job, and it mostly was. But you just stood in a room full of people who matter in your world, and you called me the most dignified person there. He exhaled slowly. And now I have to get on the subway and go home and make sure I've got enough in the account for the gas bill and figure out if Liam needs new shoes before next month, and I am trying very hard not to feel something that... He stopped again. The hallway was quiet. Somewhere in the apartment the catering team moved and clinked and murmured. Maya was looking at him like she was listening with her whole body, like she'd gone completely still. Something that... What? She said. He looked at her. He thought about the lock turning in his chest in the soup restaurant. He thought about, I don't entirely know yet. He thought about 3 years of training himself out of things that cost too much. Something that doesn't fit the math, he said. She was quiet for a long moment. She looked at him the way she'd looked at that 45-day deal, not certain, not afraid, but clear. Like a person who has decided where they stand. Then maybe, she said softly, the math is wrong. He looked at her. She held his gaze and didn't move. And the thing about Maya Klein, the thing that undid him quietly in that hallway, more than the $4 billion and the way she moved through rooms and all the distance between their worlds, was that she said it like she was stating a fact. Not a hope, not a pitch. A fact she had already accepted and was simply now presenting to him. He didn't trust himself to answer that. So he nodded once, and he picked up his coat. Good night, Maya, he said. Good night, Ethan. He walked to the service elevator. He pressed the button. He stood waiting for it very still, with the $320 in his pocket and a sentence in his chest that wasn't going to let him sleep. Maybe the math is wrong. The elevator came. He got in. The doors closed. He looked at himself in the polished metal of the door. Dark pants, white button-down, 34 years old, with calloused hands and a gas bill. and thought about a woman who had grown up on packet soup 6 blocks from a restaurant that still knew her mother and who had looked at him in a service hallway and said, maybe the math is wrong, like she'd already done the calculation. The elevator hit the lobby. He walked out into the night. And the city was cold and loud and ordinary, and none of it felt like it used to feel, and that scared him more than anything Marcus Webb had said or could ever say. Because fear and instinct felt the same when the stakes were real. His father had told him that, and the stakes he understood now were real. He didn't sleep well that night. He hadn't expected to. He lay on his back in the dark, listening to the building settle around him. The pipes, the neighbor's television through the wall. The sound of the city that never fully went quiet, and he stared at the ceiling and let the thoughts move through him. The way you let weather move through when you've learned there's no point fighting it. Maybe the math is wrong. He'd replayed it on the subway. He'd replayed it walking from the station. He was replaying it now at 1:30 in the morning with work in 6 hours, and a gas bill that was still a gas bill regardless of what any woman had said in any hallway. The math wasn't wrong. The math was the only thing he trusted. He turned onto his side and closed his eyes and made himself stop. He was at the diner by 5:40. Dennis was already there, which was unusual, standing at the pass-through with a coffee and the expression of a man who had received bad news and was deciding how to deliver it. Cole. He jerked his head toward the back. Quick word. Ethan followed him to the narrow office behind the kitchen. Barely a room. Really more of a widened hallway, with a desk and a filing cabinet and a calendar on the wall that was 3 months behind. Dennis didn't sit. Corporate's cutting the early shift by 2 days a week, starting next month. Budget thing. I fought it. I lost. He looked at the calendar instead of at Ethan. I'm keeping the people with seniority on the full schedule. You're at 8 months. Ethan said nothing for a moment. He ran the numbers automatically the way he always ran numbers before he'd even consciously decided to. 2 days a week gone. The difference in his monthly take-home. What moved, what got deferred, what became a problem. How much notice? He said. 30 days. Okay. He picked up his apron from the hook by the door. Thanks for telling me directly. Dennis finally looked at him. You're not going to... It's your call, Dennis. I'm not going to make it harder than it already is. He tied the apron. Can I have the early pickup days back if something opens up? First thing? Good enough. He went back to the floor. He worked the shift. He moved fast. He didn't spill anything. He didn't tell Maya when she came in that morning. She arrived at her usual time, sat at the counter, said nothing about Friday night, and he understood that she was giving him the choice of whether to bring it into this space or leave it at the door of One Beacon Tower where it had happened. He appreciated it. He poured her coffee. How's Liam? She asked. Better than me this morning. She looked at him over the mug. You look like you didn't sleep. Accurate. She waited. He could feel her waiting the way you feel a question in the air before it's spoken. She didn't push. She never pushed. That was one of the things about her that he'd stopped trying to be unaffected by. I'm losing 2 shifts a week here starting next month, he said. He hadn't planned to say it. It came out the way things came out when you were tired and the other person was paying the right kind of attention. Budget cuts. I'm sorry. No flinching, no immediate problem solving. Just that. It's manageable, he said. I'll pick up extra warehouse days or more delivery shifts. It's fine. Is it? He looked at her. It will be. She wrapped both hands around her mug. She was quiet for a moment, in the way she got quiet when she was thinking through something she wasn't sure she should say. He'd learned to recognize that pause. I have 2 more private dinners this month, she said, and a corporate lunch event the week after. The catering rate is the same. Dana already asked about you specifically. She kept her voice even professional, informational. That's your call. No pressure in any direction. He looked at her steadily. You're not going to make it easy for me to say no. I'm not trying to make it easy or hard. I'm telling you the work exists and it pays well, and you're good at it." She met his eyes. "What you do with that is yours." He picked up the coffee pot. He refilled her mug and the mug of the man 2 stools down who hadn't asked but needed it. "I'll do the dinners," he said. She nodded. She didn't smile. She seemed to understand that smiling would make it into something he wasn't ready for it to be. "I'll have Dana reach out." "Okay. Okay." He moved down the counter. He could feel her watching him for a moment, and then the feeling stopped, and when he glanced back, she was looking at her phone, reading something, her expression back to the focused neutrality of her working face. He went back to the kitchen. The 2 dinners that month were smaller than the penthouse event. The first was a working dinner. 12 people, a long table, in a private dining room at a restaurant she'd rented for the evening. Ethan worked alongside Dana and 1 other server, and Maya was in full professional mode, sharp, efficient, present to the business, and not to him, and he was grateful for it. It was easier to be invisible when she wasn't watching him. Except she was watching him. He noticed it the way you notice peripheral motion, not directly just at the edge of things. The way her gaze moved to him when a guest was dismissive with the service. The way she said, "Thank you," when he refilled her glass, which none of the other guests did, though not loudly, not demonstratively. Just "thank you" in a normal voice like he was a person. Which he was. Which should not have felt as significant as it did. The second dinner was smaller still. 7 people, her apartment again 2 weeks after the first. Different guests, different energy, more personal, less transactional. 2 of the guests clearly knew her from a long time ago, and Ethan watched her laugh differently around them, easier, deeper, the laugh that got out before she decided whether to let it. At the end of the night, when the guests had gone, and Dana and the other server had finished breakdown and left, Maya came into the kitchen where Ethan was finishing the last of the glass inventory. "You don't have to do that," she said. "It's part of the job." Dana and the others already left. "I know." He kept counting. 20 minutes more and it's done. It'd take you twice as long to leave it and clean it up yourself tomorrow." She leaned against the doorframe and watched him. "You always finish things." "Force of habit." "It's not a habit. It's character." She said it simply, without embellishment, the way she stated facts. He kept his hands moving. "Can I ask you something?" "You're going to." Whether you say yes or not. The familiar line, the echo of all the times they'd used it. A shorthand, now, a small piece of their specific language. "What did you want before? When you were younger? What did you think your life was going to look like?" He paused. Set down the inventory sheet. Thought about whether to answer honestly or efficiently. He was tired enough that the distinction had blurred. "I thought I'd move up in logistics," he said. "I had a plan. Management, then regional director, then, I don't know. Something that meant I'd done the thing I said I was going to do." He picked the sheet back up. Then Rachel left and there was Liam, and the plan became something else. "Do you miss it?" "The original plan." "Sometimes I miss the certainty of it, the idea that the path was clear." He wrote down the final number, capped the pen. "But Liam's the best thing I've ever done. So the math on that one at least is clean." She smiled just slightly. "The math." He looked up. He hadn't meant to use that word. He saw her recognize it too, the echo of the hallway. Maybe the math is wrong, and something passed between them in the kitchen light, quiet and specific, like a frequency only the 2 of them were tuned to. "What about you?" he said. "What about me? When you were young, growing up on Decker Street, what did you want?" She looked at the floor for a moment. "I wanted to not be afraid," she said. "That was the whole thing, actually. Everything I built, the company, the money, the floor I'm on, it was all just trying to get to a place where I wasn't scared anymore." She looked up. "Turns out that place doesn't exist. You just get scared about different things." "Bigger things," he said. "Sometimes." She held his gaze. Sometimes the same small things, just from higher up. The kitchen was quiet between them. The city hummed outside the windows. He thought about a woman in a two-bedroom apartment on Decker Street making packet soup, watching her mother leave for the night shift, building a plan the way a person builds a wall, one piece at a time. Not because you know what it'll look like when it's done, but because the alternative is being open to everything that can hurt you. He knew that architecture. He'd built the same kind of wall. "Maya," he said. "I know," she said. "I haven't said anything yet." "I know what you're about to say." She looked at him steadily. "You're going to say that this, whatever this is, doesn't make sense. That the distance between your life and mine is too specific and too real to pretend isn't there. That you have a son and responsibilities and you don't have the luxury of—" She stopped. "Of things that don't fit the math." He was quiet. "I'm not asking you to pretend the distance isn't there," she said. Her voice was low and direct. "I'm not asking you for anything, Ethan. I want to be clear about that. But I am asking you—" She paused again, the careful word pause. "Not to close a door because you're afraid of what's on the other side." "I'm not afraid," he said. "I think you are." No accusation in it. "I think you're one of the bravest people I've ever met, and I think you're terrified of this specifically because it's the one thing you can't manage your way through." The truth of it landed in his chest before he could redirect it somewhere safer. He stood with it for a moment. He didn't argue. "What do you want from me?" he said. Genuine, not defensive. She looked at him for a long time. "I want to know you," she said. "That's all. Not your situation, not what you need or what I can provide or any of the geometry of it." She pushed off the doorframe. "I want to know who Ethan Cole is when he's not holding everything together." "I'm always holding everything together," he said. "I know." She walked to the counter and picked up her keys, her phone, the movement of someone ending the evening respecting the line. "But you don't have to be. Not here." She looked back at him from the doorway. "Not with me." He didn't answer. She didn't wait for one. She went down the hallway, and he heard the quiet sounds of the apartment settling, and he stood in the kitchen under the clean overhead light and felt the wall he'd built do something walls weren't supposed to do. It held. It held fine. But through it, something was coming anyway, not crashing through, not violent, just seeping. The way warmth comes through something solid when the source of it is patient enough. He finished the inventory. He turned off the kitchen light. He let himself out. 3 days later, she texted him at 10 in the morning. He was between the diner and the warehouse on the subway, reading it on his phone in the fluorescent car light. Liam Free. Saturday afternoon. There's a science museum downtown doing a new exhibit on space exploration. I have a membership I never use. Thought he might want to see it. No obligation. He read it twice. He thought about it for 2 full stops. He'd love it, he typed back. He'll talk about it for 6 months. Good, she sent back. I could use 6 months of someone being excited about something. He put the phone in his pocket, and the train moved, and he thought about what it meant. A billionaire with a science museum membership she never used. Texting a man on the subway to ask about his kid's Saturday. The gap between those two facts was enormous, and somehow, inexplicably, it was exactly what made him want to say yes. "You coming too?" he typed. "If that's okay." "It's okay," he sent. He got off at his stop. He walked to the warehouse in the cold. He was early for the first time in 2 months. Saturday was overcast and cold enough for heavy coats, and Liam wore his space-themed hat, dark blue, with a small embroidered Saturn on the front, a birthday gift from Mrs. Carver, and talked continuously from the moment they left the apartment about what he hoped the exhibit would have. Ethan listened and gave the appropriate responses, and felt the uncomplicated happiness that came from watching his son be fully entirely himself. Maya met them at the entrance. She was in a dark coat, no corporate surface to her casual hands and pockets, and she was already smiling when she saw Liam coming up the steps. Liam stopped 2 steps away from her and looked up. "Do you know about the James Webb Telescope?" "I know some things," she said seriously. "What do you know about it?" "Everything. Liam said with complete accuracy as far as Ethan could determine, and walked through the door she held open like he'd been coming here his whole life. Ethan stopped beside her. "Brace yourself," he said. "I'm ready." She fell into step beside him. "I researched beforehand." He looked at her. "You researched." 3 hours last night. I didn't want to get caught not knowing something." She said it without embarrassment, simply like studying before a presentation. "He's impressive. I wanted to keep up." He looked at her for a second longer than he meant to. She noticed she always noticed, but she just walked forward toward the sound of Liam's voice, already calling back to them about something he'd spotted in the lobby display. They spent 3 hours in that museum. Liam led, always moving from exhibit to exhibit with the specific authority of a child who has decided this is his domain, and Ethan and Maya moved with him side by side, close enough that their arms occasionally touched in the narrower corridors. Not dramatically, just the ordinary physical fact of two people walking together in a crowded space. Neither of them moved away from it. At the deep space exhibit, Liam pressed his face against the glass of a display case containing a meteorite sample and went very quiet, the way he went quiet when something was actually getting through to him past the performance of excitement and into the real thing. "That's older than Earth," he said, very quietly, like he was afraid of disturbing it. "About 4.5 billion years?" Maya said beside him. Liam turned and looked at her. "How do they know? Radiometric dating, the decay of radioactive isotopes." She paused. "I can explain how that works if you want, but it's going to take a while." Liam's eyes went wide. He turned to Ethan. "Can she?" Ethan looked at Maya. She was watching Liam with an expression he'd never seen on her before, open and unguarded, and something very close to joy. The kind that doesn't know it's being observed. "Yeah," Ethan said. "She can." They found a bench nearby, and Maya explained radiometric dating to a 7-year-old while Ethan sat and watched it happen, and felt something in him. The wall, the math, the managed life. Go quiet in a way it almost never did. Not gone. He wasn't naive enough to think it was gone. But quiet for now. Patient. Like it too was deciding something. Liam fell asleep on the subway home, leaning against Ethan's arm hat, slightly askew, still clutching the exhibit pamphlet he'd insisted on taking. Ethan sat with his son's weight against his shoulder and his hand resting on the boy's back, the way parents rest hands on sleeping children, automatic, instinctive, the oldest kind of keeping something safe. Maya sat across from them. She was watching Liam sleep with a look that was soft and far away, and private, and when she felt Ethan looking at her, she didn't make it into anything. She just let him see it. "You know what he asked me," she said quietly, so as not to wake Liam, "when you were getting coats at the end." "What?" "He asked if you were happy." Ethan stilled. "I told him I thought you were working on it," she said. "He thought about it and he said—" She paused. Something moved across her face. "He said, good. He worries about me, but I worry about him too." She looked at Ethan directly. "He's 7 years old and he's worrying about his father." Ethan looked at his sleeping son. The hat with the Saturn. The pamphlet. The small certain weight of him. "I know," he said. His voice came out quieter than he intended. "He shouldn't have to," Maya said. Not as criticism. Just again as fact. "No," Ethan agreed. "He shouldn't." The train moved through the dark tunnel. The car was mostly empty, just a few other passengers, the ordinary Saturday afternoon city folding itself up around them. Liam breathed slow and even against Ethan's arm. Maya leaned forward slightly, her elbows on her knees, her voice low. "I know you're careful. I know why you're careful, and I am not asking you to stop being careful." She looked at him. "But I need you to hear me when I say that whatever you're afraid of, the distance, the difference, what people will think, whether you can trust something you can't fully calculate." She held his eyes. "I'm afraid of the same things. I want you to know that. I'm not standing on some other side of this. I'm right here in the same place. The train slowed for the next stop. Liam shifted against his arm, didn't wake. I heard you, Ethan said. Not a deflection, not a door closing, something real. She looked at him for one more moment, and then she sat back. And they rode the rest of the way in the kind of silence that isn't empty, the kind that's full of everything that's been said, and everything that doesn't need saying yet. And the sleeping child between them, who worried about his father and told a near stranger about it, without even knowing what he was giving away. When they reached their stop, Ethan lifted Liam without waking him. The boy's head dropped to his shoulder. Maya held the subway door. Thank you, Ethan said. For today. Thank you for letting me come, she said. And then quietly, almost to herself, I forgot what it felt like. To just be somewhere. He looked at her. The doors were going to close. Maya. He shifted Liam's weight. Next Saturday. Nothing fancy. Liam makes terrible pancakes, and he's very proud of them. A pause. The closest thing to an open door he'd offered since the first morning she'd walked into the Millbrook and ordered scrambled eggs. You could come, if you want. She stood on the platform. The doors held. The city noise moved around them. Yes, she said. Like it was the easiest word she'd ever said. Like she'd been waiting to say it for a while. The doors closed. He walked home with his son on his shoulder, and a yes still sitting in his chest, warm and terrifying and real. The pancakes were objectively a disaster. Liam had insisted on doing everything himself, measuring, mixing, pouring with the focused determination of a child who had decided that competence was non-negotiable, and the result was a stack of thick, slightly lopsided circles that were burned on the outside and uncertain on the inside and dusted with too much powdered sugar because Liam had sneezed while holding the shaker and committed to the decision rather than admit the error. Maya ate 2 of them without hesitation and said they were the best pancakes she'd ever had. And the remarkable thing was that she didn't say it like someone being kind. She said it like someone stating a preference. Liam looked at her with the pure, uncomplicated satisfaction of a person whose work has been recognized. I can teach you, he said. I would like that very much, she said. Ethan stood at the counter with his coffee and watched the 2 of them at the kitchen table, his son explaining the precise ratio of batter to pan using hand gestures, and Maya listening with her chin in her hand and the expression she got when something genuinely interested her, and he felt the wall again. But different now. Not defensive. More like something that had done its job for a long time and was figuring out what it was for now that the threat had changed shape. He poured himself more coffee. He sat down at the table. He let himself be there in the ordinary Saturday morning of it without managing it into something smaller. It was the hardest thing he'd done in years. It was also, he was beginning to understand the most important. She came 3 more Saturdays in a row. Each time a little more natural than the last, the way anything becomes natural when you stop fighting it and let it find its own shape. The first Saturday was pancakes. The second was a trip to a farmer's market 3 blocks from his apartment, where Liam interrogated every vendor about their growing methods, and Maya bought vegetables she didn't know how to cook, and Ethan gave her a 10-minute tutorial on what to do with a bunch of Swiss chard that made her take notes on her phone with great seriousness. The third Saturday it rained and they stayed in, and Liam fell asleep on the couch, watching a documentary about the Hubble telescope, and Ethan and Maya sat at the kitchen table for 2 hours talking in low voices about everything and nothing, her company, his father, the city they'd both grown up poor in and navigated differently, the particular loneliness of being someone other people projected things onto. Do you know what they call me online? She said. During that third Saturday, her hands around a mug of actual good coffee Ethan had bought specifically because she'd mentioned once in passing that she couldn't stand bad coffee. Some of it, he said. The Ice Queen. She said it without affect, the way you say a name for a thing that stopped having power over you at some point, but that you still carry with you evidence of a verdict you didn't ask for. Because I don't perform warmth for people who are watching. Because I make hard decisions without crying in public about them. She looked at her mug. Because I'm a woman who runs things and doesn't apologize for it. It's not a fair name, he said. No. She looked up. But you know what's interesting? The same people who call me that, they have a name for you too. He held her gaze. He knew what was coming. Gold digger, she said. Quiet, direct, the word landing between them, clean and ugly. That's what some of the people in my world have started saying. Not to my face, but I hear things. She didn't look away. Does that bother you? He thought about it honestly. It bothered me more before, he said, when I was afraid it might be true. She frowned. How could it be true? You've never asked me for anything. I know. He turned his mug slowly. But I was afraid that the wanting something better for Liam, something easier for us, that maybe that was enough to make it true. That I was here because of what you could represent, not who you are. The apartment was quiet around them, just the rain and Liam's slow breathing from the couch. And now, she said. Now I know it's not true, he said, because what I want has nothing to do with what you have. He looked at her. It has everything to do with who you are at a diner counter at 8 in the morning when nobody's watching. She was very still for a moment. The rain moved against the window. Ethan, she said. I know, he said. I know the distance is still real. I know your world and my world are. I know what people will say. I know it's complicated, and I know I'm a single father working 3 jobs, and I know... He stopped. Let the air settle. I know all the reasons it doesn't fit. But, she said, but my son told you he worries about me. He kept his eyes on her. And you came back the next Saturday, and the one after that, and you learned about radiometric dating, and you ate terrible pancakes, and you took notes about Swiss chard. He exhaled slowly. And you are the most honest person I have been in a room with since I lost the ability to trust that honesty was something people actually offered. She looked at him for a long time. Something was moving in her eyes, not tears, just depth. The kind of expression that comes from being seen accurately by someone you hadn't planned on letting that close. I told you something I've never told anyone, she said, about being a virgin in a certain sense. He understood what she meant, not the literal word, but the deeper thing, the thing she'd whispered to him 3 Saturdays ago in a moment so unguarded it had stopped him cold. That for all the power and money and empire there were entire rooms of herself she had never let anyone into. Not really, not fully. That in all the ways that actually mattered, she had never been known. I told you that, and you didn't make it into anything, she said. You just held it. It wasn't mine to make into something, he said. Most people would have. I know. She set down her mug. She looked at him with the same directness she had used from the very first morning, sharp, clear, no performance in it. I don't know how to do this, she said. I want to be honest with you about that. I know how to run a company. I know how to negotiate and strategize and read a room and make the hard call. She paused. I don't know how to just be with someone. I've never been good at it. I've always found a way to make it transactional because transactional is something I can manage. I know, he said. You're not scared of that. He thought about it. I'm terrified of it, he said. But I'm more scared of sitting at my kitchen table in 10 years, still running the same math, telling myself it's functional, watching my son grow up and learn from me, that the right response to something real is to defer it because it doesn't fit the plan. She looked at him. Her jaw was tight, not with anger, with the effort of not looking away from something she'd decided to look at. I don't want to hurt you, she said. Or Liam. I know you don't. I need you to know that I'm aware of what this could cost you. The public thing. If people find out, and they will find out, I have very limited privacy, they will say things. About your motives, about mine, about Maya. He said her name the way you say a name when you need someone to stop and hear you. She stopped. I've spent 3 years letting the weight of other people's judgments tell me what I'm worth. He kept his voice level. I'm done with that math. It never added up to anything I wanted to keep. The rain, the sleeping boy on the couch, the kitchen table between them with the coffee mugs and the ordinary domestic fact of a Saturday morning that had somehow become, without either of them planning it, the place where two people who had each built very good walls had run out of reasons to keep them up. Maya reached across the table. She put her hand over his. Not dramatically, just placed it there, the simple, deliberate fact of it warm and steady. He looked down at their hands. He looked up at her. Okay, she said, softly. Just that word, but with everything in it. He turned his hand over and held hers. Okay, he said. The story broke on a Wednesday. He found out from Dennis, of all people, who came in that morning with his phone out and the expression of a man delivering news he wasn't sure how to categorize. He showed Ethan the screen without comment. It was a gossip site, not a major outlet, but the kind that fed the major ones, with a photo taken at the farmer's market 2 Saturdays ago. Grainy, long lens, the kind of photo that told you someone had been patient and deliberate about getting it. Ethan and Maya at a produce stand side by side, and you couldn't see much, but you could see enough. You could see the lean of her toward him. You could see his hand touching her elbow briefly when he pointed at something. You could see two people who were not behaving like a billionaire CEO and her employee. The headline was the part that hit him in the stomach. Klein Industries, CEO, Maya Klein's new project, single dad server, seen at multiple private residences. He read it once. He handed the phone back to Dennis. He tied his apron and went to the floor and worked the shift. His phone buzzed 17 times before he went on break. He didn't look at it until 11 when the diner emptied out, and he sat in the back booth and read through the notifications with the focused calm of a man doing damage assessment after a storm, methodical, looking for the edges of it, figuring out what was still standing. There were texts from numbers he didn't recognize. There were comments on an Instagram account he barely used. There was a voicemail from his sister in Ohio who had seen it on Facebook and was from the tone operating at a level of excitement that exceeded the situation by several degrees. And there was one text from Maya sent at 8:47 that morning. I know. I'm sorry. Call me when you can. I mean that when you can, not when you think you should. He read that one 3 times. He called her at 11:15, standing outside the diner in the cold with his coat open because he'd come out fast and forgotten to button it. She picked up immediately. Ethan? Tell me what you know, he said. The photo's from the market. My security team is looking into who sold it. It'll be someone peripheral, it always is. There are 3 more outlets picking it up as of an hour ago. Her voice was controlled, but he could hear something underneath it. Not panic. Maya didn't panic, but a specific tension, the kind that came from watching something you'd tried to protect become exposed. The narrative they're running is predictable. Gold digger. Yes, and my side of it isn't much better. Billionaire and the help with the implication that I'm naive. Or bored. A pause. Neither of which is accurate. I know they're not accurate. Ethan? Her voice changed. The control softened. How are you? Not the situation. You. He leaned against the wall. The city moved past him, taxis, a woman pushing a stroller, a delivery guy on a bike, the ordinary perpetual motion of a place that didn't stop for anyone's private crisis. I'm okay, he said, and then, because it was her, and he'd decided to stop managing everything into something smaller. I'm angry. Not at you, at the ease of it, the way someone can reduce something real to a headline and half the people reading it will accept that as the whole story. Yes, she said, quietly, like she'd lived that specific anger for a long time. What do you want to do? He said. A pause. He could hear her thinking. I want to let my PR team release a brief, non-dramatic statement that confirms we know each other and declines to provide further comment. Standard, boring, gives no oxygen. She paused again. But I want to know what you want. Because this is your life being written about, not just mine, and the people writing it have access to your name and your job, and Liam, he said. They don't have his name yet. My team is monitoring that specifically. If anyone publishes anything about a minor... Her voice went flat and precise in a way he'd never heard before, a register of controlled fury. I have lawyers for that. He believed her completely. Okay. He buttoned his coat. Do the statement. Keep it boring. He looked out at the street. And Maya, I'm not going anywhere. I need you to know that. Whatever they write. Silence on the line. Then, you mean that? I'm not in the habit of saying things I don't mean. Another silence shorter. No, she said. You're not. And then very quietly, thank you. The statement went out Thursday afternoon. It was 4 sentences. Maya Klein's spokesperson confirmed she had a personal acquaintance with Mr. Cole, noted that private relationships were not subject to corporate disclosure, and wished all parties a lovely day. The tone was so polished and impenetrably bland that several outlets actually ran the story about how boring the statement was, which effectively killed the momentum. The gossip cycle moved on by Friday. There was always something else. There always was. But the thing it left behind, the residue of having been seen and having stayed anyway, was different from what Ethan expected. He'd expected to feel exposed, raw, the specific vulnerability of being talked about by people who didn't know you and had decided they did. Instead, he felt clear, like something that had been murky had settled. Like the storm had passed through and taken the debris with it, and what was left was just the ground solid, actual undramatic. He was in the diner Saturday morning when Marcus Webb walked in. He hadn't seen Marcus since the penthouse dinner. He watched him come through the door and recognized the specific quality of a man who has come somewhere to make a point which is different from a man who has come somewhere with a purpose. Marcus looked around, found Ethan and walked to the counter and sat down. Ethan poured him a coffee without being asked. Marcus looked at the cup, then at Ethan. You've been in the news, he said. Briefly, Ethan said. How's that feel? Like something that happened and is now over. He picked up the pot, moved to refill the cup 2 stools down. What can I get you? Marcus turned the cup slowly. I want you to understand something, he said. His voice was lower now. The audience performance quality from the penthouse was gone, replaced by something that was almost honest. Maya and I were together for 4 years. I know her better than you do. Probably, Ethan said. You've had more time. Marcus blinked. He'd expected deflection or defensiveness. Ethan could see the recalibration in his expression. She's not good at being with someone, Marcus said. She shuts down. She prioritizes the work. She'll cancel plans without Marcus. Ethan set the pot down. He looked at him directly, without hostility, without performance. You came in here on a Saturday morning to tell me about a woman I can form my own opinions about. He kept his voice level. I appreciate that you have history with her. That history isn't nothing, but I'm not going to let you use it to build a case. He picked the pot back up. Now, do you want anything to eat, or is this just the coffee? Marcus looked at him for a long moment. The assessment, the one he'd done at the penthouse, up and down, landing on a conclusion. But it landed different this time. Ethan could see it recalibrate. You're not scared of me, Marcus said. Not angry. More like he was noting something unexpected. I'm not scared of people who lead with the intention to diminish, Ethan said simply. It costs too much energy. Marcus was quiet. He looked at his coffee. Something in his posture changed, not collapsed, but rearranged the way a man sits when he's stopped performing and is just sitting. He drank the coffee. He put $12 on the counter. He left without saying anything else. Ethan watched the door close. Al, 2 stools down, looked up from his newspaper. That was the ex-husband. Al said. Yes, it was. You handled that well. I had good practice. Ethan picked up the $12 ring and put the change in the tip jar. He left an 80-cent tip. Man's got more money than he has self-awareness, Al said, and went back to his newspaper. Maya came in at 9:15. She sat at the counter. He poured the coffee before she asked. She looked at him carefully the way she always looked at him when she was trying to read something specific. You look different, she said. Marcus was here, he said. She stilled. What did he? Nothing that mattered. We had a conversation and he left. He leaned on the counter not far just present. He's not a villain, Maya. He's just a man who lost something and doesn't know what to do with that. She looked at him for a moment. You're telling me not to be angry on your behalf. I'm telling you I don't need you to be. That's not the same thing. I know. He held her gaze. But it's still what I'm saying. She breathed, let it out slow. Okay. Okay. He straightened, scrambled. Please. She wrapped her hands around the mug. Then, there's a thing, next weekend, not a business dinner. A benefit, it's for a literacy program I've been funding for 6 years. Black tie. I go every year alone, and I sit at my table, and I talk to the people I'm supposed to talk to, and I go home. She looked at him. I'd like to not go alone this year. He looked at her, the full weight of what she was saying, not just the invitation, but the public declaration of it. No private dinner, no farmer's market, no service elevator. A room full of people who would know who she was and would see who she'd arrived with and would form conclusions that would then exist in the world. You know what that means, he said. In terms of, yes, unwavering. I know exactly what it means. That's why I'm asking clearly in the middle of a diner on a Saturday morning, so there's no confusion about what I'm saying. He looked at her. He thought about the lock turning in the soup restaurant. He thought about the wall. He thought about his son at a kitchen table explaining pancakes and a woman taking notes about Swiss chard. And maybe the math is wrong, said in a hallway, like a fact that had already been checked. He thought about his father's voice. Fear and instinct feel the same when the stakes are real. I don't own a tuxedo, he said. Something brightened in her eyes. Not quite a smile yet, one beat before the smile. I know people, she said. I figured. He picked up his order pad. He was smiling now. He couldn't help it, and he didn't try to. Write down the details. I'll figure out the rest. She took the pen he offered and wrote on the back of a receipt. When she handed it back, her fingers rested against his for a moment. Just a moment, the briefest ordinary contact, the kind that meant nothing from the outside and everything from the inside. He folded the receipt and put it in his apron pocket next to the spot where Liam's rocket drawing still lived. The benefit was the following Saturday. He stood in front of the bathroom mirror at 7 in the rented tuxedo. It fit, which was the minimum requirement, and also the total extent of his investment in formal wear. And he looked at himself, and he thought, this is what it looks like when a man decides to stop deferring his own life. Not a revolution, not a transformation, just a man in a tuxedo who had made a decision and was standing in it. He picked up Liam, who declared with great authority that his father looked like an astronaut, which was the highest compliment in Liam's vocabulary, and dropped him at Mrs. Carver's, who pressed his arm and said absolutely nothing but communicated volumes. The car Maya sent arrived at 7:30. He got in. She was already inside, and she was wearing something dark and simple and exactly like her, and she looked at him for a full second before she said anything. You clean up well? She said. You say that like you're surprised. I'm not surprised. I'm noting it for the record. She looked at him steadily. How are you feeling? He thought about it. Actually thought about it with the honesty she had asked of him from the beginning in a diner on West 14th over scrambled eggs and bad coffee that she'd never once complained about. Nervous, he said, but clear. Yeah, she said. Me too. The car moved into the city. They sat side by side in the back seat, not performing ease, not managing the moment, Just two people who had found each other by accident in the most ordinary possible place and had chosen carefully and deliberately and with full knowledge of the cost to keep showing up for it. She reached over in the dark of the car and took his hand. Not dramatically. The same way she'd done it at his kitchen table, the simple, deliberate fact of it. He held on. Outside, the city moved past the windows lit and loud and indifferent. The way cities were, the way they had always been, asking nothing and offering nothing and simply being the enormous ordinary place where everything important happened to small, specific, irreplaceable people who were just trying to get the math right. He had thought the math was the thing. He had built his whole life around its precision. What fit, what didn't. What was manageable, what was not. He had defended himself with it against everything that might cost too much or ask too much or become too much to survive losing. But the math had never once in 3 years of doing it correctly made him feel what he felt in the back of that car with his son at home, dreaming about Ganymede and a woman beside him who had grown up on packet soup 6 blocks from a woman who still knew her mother and had built an empire out of moving when the window was open and understanding that fear and instinct were the same thing when the stakes were real. Ethan Cole had spent 3 years surviving. He was done surviving. He held Maya Klein's hand in the dark moving car and looked out at the city that had ground him down and asked nothing and given nothing and been exactly what it always was. And he felt for the first time in longer than he could name that he was not moving through his life. He was living it, and that he understood now with the clean and certain clarity of a man who had finally run the right calculation was the only math that had ever mattered.